According to the Babylonians, Tiamat is the dragon goddess of salt water. She existed before the world we know it was created, and she is the mother of everything that exists, including the gods. Her consort was Apsu, god of the sweet water, or what we now know as fresh water. Together, they represented the idea that chaos precedes form and order, the foundations on which civilizations are built. This idea of the primordial waters of chaos that needs to be tamed is prevalent in ancient mythology, and Tiamat's story is one of the earliest recorded instances of what has been termed Kaioskan, the struggle against chaos. We'll touch on this a bit later on, but first let's take a look at Tiamat's story as recorded in the Enuma Elish. The Enuma Elish is an ancient Babylonian text first found by Henry Layard in the ruins of an ancient library in Nineveh. The Enuma Elish is known as the Babylonian epic of creation, and it is generally accepted to have been written at the time of the Sumerians. It tells of the story of creation and how Marduk, the chief god of the Babylonians, rose to power and preeminence over all creation. But it begins with Tiamat and Apsu, the goddess of salt water and the god of fresh water. When the two kinds of waters mix, the gods are formed from them. Anshar and Kishar are created first, with Anu and Ki to follow. From Anu and Ki emerge other gods, the most important being Enki and Marduk. As the young gods and goddesses grew up, they became more and more noisy. And Father Apsu was no longer able to sleep. He complained to Tiamat about the growing chaos, but Tiamat, like most mothers, was able to tolerate her offspring, and she turned a blind eye to the noise. Apsu, in his anger, decides to kill all of the young gods. Tiamat rejects this plan, a plan that Enki overhears. Enki comes up with his own plan, and this time he recites a spell that puts Apsu to sleep. There is some debate about whether or not Enki kills Apsu, or puts him in a death-like sleep before holding him captive in his temple, but Enki is successful in taking the mantle of Apsu. After the death of Apsu, Tiamat takes another consort, Kingu, and places him at the head of her army. In order to avenge Apsu's death, Tiamat started to give birth to many monsters. These monsters form the bulk of our army. Monsters such as scorpion men, fishmen, giant sea serpents, and many others. She gives the Tablet of Destinies to Kingu, her new general and lover, and prepares for war with the young gods. The young gods, in their desperation, appoint Marduk as their chief general. He is their new champion, with the promise that he becomes the chief god if he emerges victorious over Tiamat. In the final battle, Marduk is able to challenge Tiamat to one-on-one combat, a challenge which she accepts. Marduk is victorious over Tiamat and uses her body parts to finish the rest of creation. From her ribs, he creates the vault of the heavens and the earth, and from her eyes, the Tigris and Euphrates rivers flow. After his victory, Marduk then returns from finishing the rest of creation and creates a new dwelling place for himself as the new champion of the gods. He calls his new dwelling place Babylon, and with the Tablet of Destinies now in his hands, he becomes the chief of all of creation. His new home, Babylon, means the gate of the gods, and it is from here that civilization first begins. The Tiamat mythology is one of the earliest recorded examples of Kaioskan. This is a mythological struggle, usually against an aquatic creature or beast, that represents chaos before order and form can be established. In ancient Greek mythology, this is found in the battle against the Hydra when Hercules defeats it. It's also found when Apollo kills the python before he can take the oracle at Delphi. In the Tanakh, this shows up in the creation story. Before God creates light, there is already a reference to these primordial waters, a common theme of chaos in the ancient Near East. Overcoming water is once again seen in Noah's Ark. Noah and his family have to survive this chaos, the chaos of the flood, before order can be restored on earth. Once again, this is seen in the crossing of the Red Sea. For the Israelite nation to be reborn, their faith was tested in this crossing of water. This is reiterated when the Jordan had to be crossed, right when they had finally reached the Promised Land. Some scholars also suggest that the story of Marduk's victory over Tiamat represents the change from a matriarchal society to a patriarchal society that happened in the ancient Near East. To recap, Tiamat is not a Swedish metal band or a Final Fantasy boss. Tiamat is the ancient Babylonian goddess of saltwater and represents the chaos before order. She is a symbol for all the untamed, for all of the wild, things that must be defeated for civilization to be founded and progress.